Welcome to Talk Treatises.
It's wonderful to be back.
Today, I want you to do something for me. I want you to just close your eyes for a second and imagine a city.
Okay.
But this isn't just any city. This is the city that functions as the brain of the ancient world. A place where the library shelves are literally groaning under the weight of centuries of human wisdom. I'm talking mathematics, astronomy, poetry, philosophy, just the absolute best of what humanity has thought and written down.
The Library of Alexandria.
Exactly. And the architecture is just this blinding mix of marble and gold, all basking in that brilliant Mediterranean sunlight. It is, for all intents and purposes, the absolute pinnacle of civilization.
It sounds like a paradise for the mind, at least.
It does, doesn't it? But now I want you to look a little closer. Look past the grand temples and the libraries and look at the streets.
Mm-hmm.
The streets are silent. And it's not a peaceful silence. They're tense. The usual commercial bustle, the noise of the harbor, it's all gone. And the only things you see moving at night are, on the one hand, patrols of Roman soldiers, and on the other, these groups of zealous, intense-looking monks.
Okay, that sounds less like a paradise and much more like a dystopian novel.
Yeah.
Like you're describing a high-tech society that's right on the brink of a total system collapse.
It had that exact feeling. But this is history. This is Alexandria in the year 391 AD. And today, we are doing a deep dive into the classic work Serapis by Georg Ebers. And this isn't just a historical novel. It's more like an autopsy of a culture war.
And a very specific, incredibly pivotal kind of culture war. Serapis is so fascinating because it captures this moment of fracture. It's not just a story about a single city. It's a story about the violent friction between two entire worldviews.
Right.
On one side, you've got the dying aesthetic world of paganism, a world built on art, on statues, on philosophy, and a celebration of the human body and the physical world. And on the other side, you have the rising ascetic power of Christianity.
And our mission for this deep dive is to really explore that philosophical clash right at the very end of an era. We want to see what happens when a society fundamentally changes its mind about what is good, and maybe more importantly, what is beautiful.
The core question Ebers poses in this work is, it's incredibly provocative, and it's one that still echoes today, I think. Does the destruction of art and the rejection of all worldly beauty, does that constitute a moral triumph? Or is it a crime against humanity itself?
That is a massive question. So let's try and unpack this. Let's start with the intellectual landscape that Ebers paints for us. He sets the scene right away with this just incredible atmosphere. He takes us to the commercial harbor of Kabotus. Now, usually a harbor in Alexandria would be screaming with noise, sailors, merchants, goods being loaded and unloaded. But Ebers describes it as quiet.
But not a peaceful quiet. He uses a very, very specific phrase, fevered tension.
Fevered tension. I love that. It's so evocative.
It does a ton of heavy lifting, doesn't it? Fevered implies sickness, a kind of delirium. It tells us right away this isn't the silence of rest, it's the silence of a held breath right before a scream. The text describes the whole city as having this mysterious burden weighing on its heart, like a dreamer being oppressed by a nightmare.
That nightmare has a name, right? It's the Edict of Theodosius.
Precisely. The Emperor Theodosius has issued a decree, and it's a big one. It forbids all pagan worship. But we have to understand, this isn't just a legal change. It's not like a memo just got sent out to the governors. It creates a massive physical and social fracture right down the middle of the city.
And Ebers illustrates this divide through architecture, which I find brilliant. You have these two massive physical structures basically staring each other down across the city, and they represent two completely different realities.
They absolutely do. It's a tale of two buildings.
Let's break those down. So on one side, you have the House of the Holy Martyr. This is a Christian refuge. It's an inn run by a woman known as the Widow Mary. And the description of it, well, it's not exactly a five-star hotel, is it?
Far, far from it. And this is so crucial to understanding the Christian perspective in the book. Ebers describes it as smelling of smoke, of food, and of crowded humanity. It's dark, it's enclosed. The feeling you get is almost claustrophobic.
It sounds gritty.
It is gritty. But, and this is the important part, it's also a place of charity. This is where the poor go. It's where the hungry are fed. Aesthetically, though, it represents a total rejection of the external world. It suggests that what really matters is internal salvation, not external beauty. The building is functional, it's charitable, and yes, it's squalid.
And then, in absolute total contrast, you have the glorious sun-drenched temple of Serapis. The Serapium.
They work for all time. That's how it's described. Ebers calls it a harmonious symphony of adoration. Just try to picture it. Hundreds of marble columns, gold leaf everywhere, and it's situated high up on the Acropolis, just bathing in the light. This place represents the entire pagan ethos. For the pagans in the story, the divine is externalized through beauty, through light, through grandeur. To build something beautiful is, in itself, an act of worship. It's how you honor the gods.
So the stage is literally set. You have the dark, charitable, but squalid inn versus the bright, beautiful, but ultimately doomed temple. It's almost a sensory war before the actual war even begins.
It is. Smell versus sight, smoke versus sunlight, the enclosed versus the open.
Exactly. And a setting like that is nothing without the people who have to live in it.
Yeah.
And Ebers gives us this cast of characters that essentially walk onto the stage wearing their philosophies on their sleeves.
He really does. It's almost like a Socratic dialogue that's been disguised as a novel. The characters are stand-ins for huge ideas.
They really are. So let's meet the players. First up, we have Karnas.
Karnas. He is the quintessential aesthete, the man of feeling and beauty.
I find Karnas so fascinating because on one level, he seems incredibly, almost willfully out of touch with the political reality of his situation. And yet at the same time, he's right about so many profound things. He's a musician from Taorminium in Sicily. And his philosophy as well, it's pretty simple. Life is for the enjoyment of beauty, period.
He is the voice of the old world. For Karnas, the Christian rejection of the physical world isn't just a different opinion, a different set of beliefs. He genuinely views it as a pathology, a mental sickness that has infected humanity.
Right.
There's a line he delivers that really stuck with me, and it basically sums up the entire pagan anxiety in the novel. He says, "While the arts lived, there was spring on the earth. Now they are condemned to death, and it is winter."
It is winter. That really captures the emotional state of the pagans, doesn't it? It's not just a disagreement, it's an existential threat.
It is. He sees this new morality not as a liberation from sin, but as a hibernation of the senses. He believes that by rejecting art, music, festivals, the human body, humanity is willingly entering a cold, dark, gray age.
And what I love about Karnas is that he lives this philosophy even when he's literally starving. There's that scene where his family is eating a roast fowl, which they can barely afford, and he initially gets angry about the cost, about the practicality of it all.
Yes, but then he switches gears completely. He says, "Enjoy today's gifts, and the gods will provide for tomorrow." He pours a libation, a little bit of his wine to Dionysus, even though they're poor and every drop counts. He refuses to let poverty strip him of his dignity or his appreciation for the good life.
He clings to the aesthetic of the banquet, even when the banquet is just one chicken leg.
That's it. It's a form of resistance for him. Eating well, appreciating the moment, that is his protest against the coming winter.
Precisely. And then standing in direct philosophical opposition, even though they're in the same traveling group, is Agna.
Agna. She is the ascetic soul. She's a Christian, a slave, and a singer.
But her relationship with singing is so tortured. This is where Ebers gets really psychological and interesting. She has a divine voice. It's literally described as a gift of the muses or a gift from God, depending on who you ask. But she is terrified of using it.
Yeah, she fears that using her God-given talent for what she sees as heathen pleasure creates this unbearable moral paradox for her. She has this gift of beauty, but she's been taught that beauty is a sin.
She has this metaphor she uses, which is so telling. She calls life a borrowed purse.
Exactly. And the great irony, the central conflict that really drives so much of the plot, is that she sings these pagan songs better than the pagans do.
Right. That scene with the lament of Isis, it's incredible. This is a pagan hymn where the goddess Isis is mourning the death of her husband, Osiris.
Yeah.
And Agni, the Christian slave, sings it, and everyone is just floored.
And that is Ebers' brilliant irony. Why can she sing it so well? Because she understands sorrow. As a Christian, in this specific context, her entire focus is on the suffering of the world, on sin, on grief. So when she sings a song about a goddess's grief, she isn't acting. She's channeling her own genuine Christian sorrow into a pagan liturgy. She fills the old forms with a new, raw, intense feeling.
We also had to talk about Olympius. He's the militant philosopher at the Serapis. He feels very distinct from Karnas. Karnas is an artist, a creator. Olympius is a warrior of the mind.
Olympius represents the intellectual, organized resistance. He's not just fighting to save some statues from being smashed. He argues he's fighting for the highest hopes of humanity. He frames this whole conflict as freedom of thought against what he calls the dismal doctrine of the new faith.
A dismal doctrine. I like that.
It's powerful, isn't it? He believes that if the old gods fall, then reason, philosophy, and open inquiry fall with them. It's the end of an intellectual tradition.
So we have the aesthete, the ascetic, and the militant philosopher. Let's use that to dive into the first big argument of the book. The theology of aesthetics versus iconoclasm. The love of images versus the breaking of them.
This is absolutely central to everything. We have to understand that for someone like Karnas, destroying a statue isn't just vandalism, it's not just property damage. In his worldview, it is a hate crime against the divine itself.
There's that specific scene where Karnas reacts to the destroyed temple of Dionysus. They're on a boat crossing Lake Mareotis, and they see the ruins on the shore. The text says he gets so angry he almost upsets the boat.
And his anger reveals his entire theology.
Okay.
He argues that this new order, the Christians, they fear the beautiful. They are afraid of it. Why? Because beauty celebrates the created world. It makes you fall in love with the here and now. Think about it. If you believe the world is fundamentally a place of sin and suffering that you need to escape from, then a beautiful statue that makes you fall in love with this world is actually attractive.
It's a spiritual snare.
It's a spiritual snare. That's the perfect term for it. Beauty is dangerous because it makes you want to stay here. It makes you love that borrowed purse instead of wanting to give it back.
So Ebers is presenting the pagan worldview not as idol worship in that primitive sense of just bowing down to a rock.
No, not at all. It's a highly sophisticated appreciation of art as a conduit to the divine. When they look at a statue of Apollo, they're not just seeing a handsome man carved in marble. They are seeing an ideal of harmony, of reason, of beauty that elevates the human spirit. So to destroy that statue is to lower the ceiling of human potential. It's an attack on the ideal itself.
But then you have the Christian perspective, or at least the perspective of the monks in this story. They see these things as literal demons.
Yes. The logic of destruction of iconoclasm is that to build the new truth, the old structures must be physically annihilated. You can't just ignore the Temple of Dionysus. You have to turn its marble into lime for new buildings. You have to melt down the bronze. The internal logic is that the demons live inside the physical form. So if you destroy the form, you banish the demon.
There's a really vivid description from the steward who's on the boat with them. He says the images were mutilated and insulted before being thrown into lime kiln.
And that word insulted is so key. You don't insult a rock. You insult a person or a power or an intelligence. This proves that the iconoclasts actually believed in the power of the statues. They believed the gods were real, but they were demons that had to be ritually killed and humiliated.
Karnas has this really haunting observation about the asymmetry of creation versus destruction. He says, one barbarian in 1 hour can destroy what it has taken the sublimest souls years, centuries to create.
And that just highlights the extreme fragility of culture. It's terrifying. It can take a civilization centuries to develop the mathematics, the engineering, the artistic skill, the cultural consensus to carve a masterpiece. But it takes a mob with sledgehammers one afternoon to turn it all back into dust.
So Ebers is sourcing us to ask this really uncomfortable question. Is moral purity worth the price of cultural erasure? When we cleanse a society, do we also, in a way, lobotomize it?
That's a great way to put it. And that leads perfectly into the second major argument, which I find even more relatable to modern relationships, the conflict between the psyche or the soul versus the whole human being. And this plays out in that subplot between Marcus and Dada.
This is one of the most interesting and honestly cringe-worthy philosophical disconnects in the whole book.
It really is. So Marcus is a young, extremely zealous Christian, and Dada is a pagan singer. She's full of life, of laughter. She's obsessed with ribbons and dresses and performance, and Marcus falls for her.
But not for her, right? That's the whole point. He explicitly says he wants to save her.
Exactly. He falls in love with her psyche. He wants to save her immortal soul. But in doing so, he completely ignores her personality, her desires, her actual self. He sees the ribbons and the laughter and the joy as obstacles. He wants to strip them all away to reveal the pure, abstract soul underneath.
And Dada's reaction to this is just perfect. She finds this whole concept of being loved only for her immortal soul to be totally dehumanizing. She's a creature of the moment.
She is. She essentially says, I am my laughter, I am my ribbons, I am my songs. If you strip all of that away to save some abstract soul, you've effectively killed the person I am. She even references the myth of Psyche and Eros, saying, as if I had ever heard of any Psyche but the Psyche whom Eros loved.
She wants love, not salvation.
She wants to be loved, not to be a project. And Hers, Karnas' wife, is so pragmatic about all this. She warns Dada. She says this kind of love of the soul inevitably leads to the suppression of the individual. She warns that Marcus's version of love leads to reformatories, cloisters, and the end of singing.
It's that tension between the universal and the particular. Marcus loves the universal concept of a soul, but Dada wants to be loved as the particular, the specific, flawed, ribbon-loving girl. Ebers seems to be suggesting that a philosophy that focuses entirely on the eternal soul risks becoming profoundly anti-human.
If you love the essence but you hate the manifestation, do you really love the person at all?
That's the question.
Yeah.
And we see a different, more internal version of this same struggle happening inside of Agni.
Agna is so fascinating because she herself is the battleground. She is a devout Christian, but she is also a supreme artist. Eventually mentioned, she sings the lament of Isis better than anyone.
Which is such a paradox. Can a Christian truly express the grief of a pagan goddess?
And Ebers suggests that the answer is yes, absolutely, because true art transcends dogma. Agna's very Christian sorrow animates the heathen liturgy. It suggests there is a universal human emotion, in this case, grief, that religious labels simply cannot contain. Art bridges the gap that theology widens. When she sings, the pagans in the room stop seeing a Christian slave and they just see a master artist.
Which brings us to the politics of the whole situation. Argument number 3, tolerance versus fanaticism.
This is where the book gets into the messy reality of how these ideas play out in society. Ebers gives us a glimpse of a potential middle way through the character of Porphyrius. He's a wealthy merchant, he's been baptized as a Christian, but he keeps a pagan household. He loves philosophy. He protects musicians like Karnas and his family.
He represents that fading, maybe already impossible possibility of coexistence, kind of syncretic approach.
He does. He tries to separate his private faith from his public and intellectual life. But in 391 AD Alexandria, that space for nuance is shrinking by the hour. Porphyrius is deeply anxious. He knows that in a polarized world, the moderate is always the first to get crushed.
And on the other side of his own family, you have his mother, Damia. She represents the old, unyielding aristocracy. She is not interested in compromise.
No, she views this new religion with pure, unadulterated disdain. She calls Jesus the son of the carpenter. For her, it's a class issue just as much as it is a religious one. She encourages Dada to manipulate Marcus, to make him madly and desperately in love. She wants to use beauty and desire as a weapon against the asceticism of the Christians.
That class element is so important, we can't overlook it. The Christians in the book are often depicted as the poor, the masses, the crowded humanity you find at the end. The pagans are the elite, the educated, the ones with the leisure time to enjoy art and philosophy.
Exactly. The Serapium is high culture. The Xenodocium widow marries in is, for all intents and purposes, a welfare institution. Ebers is showing us that this transition was also a shift from an aristocratic value system, which values beauty, excellence, strength, to a much more populist value system, which values charity, humility, and salvation for all, regardless of their station.
So when Karnas says it is winter, he's speaking as an artist who has lost his patrons and his audience. But for a slave, or for the beggar at the inn, this new religion might feel like the first hint of spring, because suddenly there is a system that says they matter more than the statues do.
That is the nuance. That is the complexity of what's happening. But Ebers, being a product of his time, a 19th century intellectual and a lover of classical culture, he can't help but weep for the statues.
And on that note, you have the Serapium itself being positioned as the last stand.
Yes. Olympius, the philosopher, argues that if Serapis falls, the world will crumble. Now, he doesn't necessarily mean the physical earth will split open. He means the classical worldview, the entire system of logic, aesthetics, and order that had defined their world for millennium will collapse into chaos.
And the text makes it crystal clear. This isn't just a debate anymore. The philosophers are literally arming themselves.
That's the tragedy Ebers captures so brilliantly. When dialogue fails, violence fills the vacuum. It's no longer a battle of words in the forum. It's a physical struggle for survival. The Serapium, the great library and temple, becomes a fortress.
So looking at the big picture then, what is the lasting impact of this conflict that's described in Serapis?
Ebers frames this entire transition, the move from antiquity into the Middle Ages, as a profound loss of light.
The winter metaphor coming back.
Yes. The idea is that humanity entered a kind of hibernation of the senses. We moved from a world that looked outward at the beauty of creation, at the stars, the human body, the temple, to a world that looked inward at the corruption of the soul.
The death of the joy of life.
Exactly. And that central tension between enjoying the world, the Epicurean or pagan view, and transcending the world, the ascetic or Christian view, that remains a central debate in Western ethics to this day. Are we here to enjoy the party, or are we here to clean up the mess afterward?
But art survives. That's the hopeful note in all of this, isn't it?
It is. Karnas is so resilient. Even when his entire world is literally dying around him, he insists on having 1 hour of pure and perfect enjoyment. And Ebers suggests that art, particularly music, is the only thing that can actually bridge these two warring worlds. Agna singing for the pagan lady Gorgo is the proof of that. Music becomes the common language when all other languages have failed.
And you could absolutely argue that this conflict, this whole tragic episode, prefigures the Renaissance.
Without a doubt. The Renaissance, which happened 1,000 years later, was essentially a massive attempt to reclaim that Karnas worldview, the love of beauty, the human body, classical art, but to do it within the Christian framework that Agna represents. It took a millennium, but they eventually tried to merge the soul and the beautiful once again.
That is a fantastic synthesis. Now, before we wrap up, it is time for our favorite segment where we take these ideas and we really push them to their logical and sometimes illogical breaking point.
Let's do it. I'm ready.
Okay, disclaimer time. The following segment is for entertainment and educational purposes only. These are purely hypothetical scenarios designed to test the logical limits of the work's philosophy.
We call these thought experiments.
Experiment number 1. I'm calling it the beauty algorithm.
Okay, lay it on me. The beauty algorithm.
This is based on Karnas's core assertion that the destruction of beauty is a moral crime. So, I want you to imagine a future judicial system that is governed entirely by an AI. And this AI is programmed with a single prime directive: aesthetic utilitarianism.
Aesthetic utilitarianism. Okay, I like it.
In this society, the morality of any action is judged solely by one metric: whether it increases or decreases the net amount of beauty in the world.
Wow. Okay, so if I say vandalize a statue.
That is a capital offense. It is punished more severely than financial fraud, more severely than theft, but it goes much further than that. Ugliness in architecture or even behavior becomes a crime. If you build a brutalist strip mall that ruins a beautiful view, you go to jail. If you are loud and boorish in a public space, you are fined for creating auditory ugliness.
That is terrifying. It really puts the pagan worldview to the test, doesn't it? Karnas implies that beauty is synonymous with good. But this scenario forces us to ask, can a beautiful society be a morally rotten one? If we prioritize the aesthetic over the human, do we just end up with a tyranny of the beautiful?
It sounds like a world where the House of the Holy Martyr, with all its smells and its squalor and its charity, would be bulldozed in a heartbeat. And the poor would probably be exiled from the city for being unsightly.
Exactly. It forces us to ask if compassion is sometimes inherently unaesthetic, or at least not beautiful in the classical sense. It reminds me of the darker side of certain ideologies that obsessed over the beautiful body and the pure aesthetic, which, led to some of the most horrific cruelty in human history. Karnas's view is romantic, but if you take it to its logical extreme, it becomes very dangerous.
What's the second experiment?
You tell me.
Experiment number 2. Soul divorce.
This sounds like a legal and existential nightmare.
It's based on Marcus's desire to love Dada's soul while rejecting her entire personality. So imagine a technology is invented that allows two people to interact purely as consciousnesses, as pure souls.
So no bodies, no voices, no annoying habits, and definitely no ribbons.
No ribbons, no memories of your past life, no personality quirks that have been shaped by experience, just the raw, unfiltered psyche.
Okay, so you're in this digital void with another consciousness.
Right. And you fall in love with the soul in this void. You connect on the deepest possible level. But then you meet the person in reality and you find out they are physically repulsive to you.
Yeah.
Or they have really annoying habits. Or they hold political views that you find absolutely abhorrent. Does the love hold?
Oof, that's a good one. This really tests the Christian and Platonic ideal, doesn't it? Is the soul actually the person? Or is the person the sum of their worldly attributes, their experiences, their flaws? If I love your essence, but I absolutely hate your jokes, do I really love you?
Ebers seems to side with Dada on this one, that you can't surgically separate the soul from the ribbons.
It's the ultimate blind date, and you might find out the person you connected with is your mortal enemy. And I think Dada would absolutely say, if you can't love my ribbons, you don't get my soul.
And you'd be right. It suggests that our worldly attributes, our flaws, our tastes, our physical form, they aren't just the packaging. They are the user interface of the soul. If you remove the interface, you lose the user. Well, this has been quite a journey. So to recap the central tragedy of Serapis, it's a story of a world going dark. Not necessarily because of evil, but because of a massive fundamental shift in what humanity valued.
We went from valuing the external temple of stone to valuing the internal temple of the spirit. And in that shift, an incredible number of beautiful things were smashed to pieces.
And the personal tragedy of Agni and Karnas is that they couldn't see that they were both, in their own ways, serving the exact same master.
Music.
Exactly. So here is a final provocative thought for you to mull over. If Karnas were alive today, looking at our modern world of, utilitarian architecture, brutalist concrete, and digital abstraction, would he say the winter has finally ended? Or would he say we are all still waiting for the spring?
I think he might still be wearing his coat.
I think so too.
Yeah.
This has been The Deep Dive. Join us next time.